As you may have seen, gentlemen, the Blue Archive JP Livestream has officially ended, so let us summarize everything that is new.
Blue Archive じゃ。準備運動はしっかりしましたか？気をつけるんですよ。何かありましたか？どうじゃ、似合っておるかな。不届き者がいたようじゃが、無礼者。
First of all, we are getting a brand new Shanhaijing event featuring alternative swimsuit versions of the Shanhaijing students. Fortunately, their banners do not appear to be limited. Instead, they will be added to the permanent pool, meaning they can always spook you as an off-rate unit later. But what exactly do they do? First is swimsuit Kisaki. Judging purely from her kit on paper, she appears to be very versatile supporter. Her first X skill reduces X skill cost, but it only applies to striker students or the nearest ally standing within her area. The amount of cost reduction is only 1 X skill cost for a single use, which admittedly sounds rather small. However, the effect applies to anyone inside the area. Whether that fixed area ends up being a flaw that occasionally ruined by random positioning turns out to be completely manageable. Her X skill only costs 2, which is incredible. Not only is it inexpensive, but she also grants herself X cost recovery, allowing her to recover that cost almost immediately. After activating X skill 1, it immediately changes into X skill 2. X skill 2 costs absolutely nothing, 0 cost. What it does is increase her own X cost recovery for the next 2 activations, allowing her to generate X cost much faster and recover the cost that just spent. This honestly sounds like the potential beginning of a new meter. I genuinely believe she could usher in a new era where X cost recovery becomes one of the most valuable mechanics in team building. The reason I say that is because there are many situations where we desperately want X cost recovery, but the special slots are already occupied by dedicated supports or DPS, leaving no room for additional cost generation. Having a striker capable of providing that utility could become extremely valuable. Her basic skill reduces the enemy's critical resistance. It certainly sounds useful for reducing crit malt, although I am still unsure how impactful it will actually be in practice. It should become significantly more valuable against bosses with naturally high critical resistance, such as Goz or Hard. Her enhanced skill increases both her attack and attack range. I would say this makes perfect sense, considering she fights near the front lines, and would otherwise become an easy target. The increased range should naturally help keep her further away from enemies. Her sub-skill allows her to recover HP whenever allies land a certain number of critical hits. Overall, Swimsuit Kisaki introduces a rather interesting mechanic involving 2 different X skills. Her first X skill reduces X cost for allies while preparing X skill 2. X skill 2 then focuses entirely on boosting her own X cost recovery, allowing your team to recover X faster for immediate burst windows. That alone sounds potentially very useful for raid content. So, peak or bleak? Honestly, still uncertain until we see actual gameplay. Or I guess the small body and flat chest is the reason why she is peak in the first place, but based purely on paper, her kit certainly looks far too good to casually skip, and I can already smell from miles away that she has the potential to become the next permanent meter supporter. So, just in case you do not have enough Pyrex, you may have to skip certain student banners for this. The second banner is Swimsuit Shun. She is a Sonic DPS with light armor. Interestingly enough, Swimsuit Shun actually has 2 different forms. One is Little Shun. The other is Hag Shun. Each form possesses completely different X skills. Although, in practice, both are still focused on dealing damage to a single target. Let us begin with Hag Shun. Honestly, her X skill descriptions are surprisingly confusing. So let me try to simplify them. Her first X skill deals damage to one enemy while granting a stack called Bud, which lasts for 9 seconds. Immediately afterward, her X skill card is redrawn, replacing itself with X skill 2. X skill 2 consumes the Bud stack and deals significantly higher damage. So, in short, use X skill 1. Gain Bud. Receive X skill 2. Use X skill 2 before Bud expires. Deal much bigger damage. That is essentially the entire mechanic. Her basic skill is fairly straightforward, simply dealing damage every few seconds without applying buffs or debuffs. Her enhanced skill increases attack. Her sub-skill allows Bud to charge up to 3 stages, further increasing the damage of X skill 2 depending on the number of stored charges. Overall, Hagshun appears to be a solid single target Sonic DPS. Personally, I expect her to become another version of S.Mika, just for whichever terrain S.Mika happens to dislike. Because, well, that is basically how Blue Archive works. Whenever S.Mika performs poorly somewhere, Nexon simply introduces another student specifically designed for that terrain. And perhaps that student is Hagshun. Now let us talk about Little Shun. Unlike Hagshun, her X skill is actually very easy to understand. She simply deals damage to one enemy. However, every consecutive use reduces the damage of future casts, stacking up to 3 times. Honestly, that sounds rather painful. Having your X skill deal less damage the more you use it feels quite strange. There is probably a purpose behind this mechanic, but right now I genuinely do not know what that purpose is. Her basic skill immediately grants X cost depending on the number of students in your formation. It only activates once per battle. It functions similarly to the original Shun. However, if both versions of Shun are deployed together, this basic skill will not activate. Her enhanced skill increases critical rate. Her sub-skill increases sonic effectiveness whenever she uses her X skill. Personally, I am still not entirely convinced where Little Shun actually fits. Will she become useful in raids? PvP? Some completely new content? I honestly have no idea. From my current impression, Hagshun looks considerably more promising as a dedicated Sonic DPS. Little Shun still remains a mystery. Other important changes aside from the new students, there are several additional updates worth mentioning. Fest Archive Recollection banner returns. The Fest Archive banner has returned once again. This time, Esanako and Dihina have been added. More past Fest students are also being added soon, and it seems my prediction about the Recollection Fest banner was correct. It appears to return every 6 months while adding newer past Fest students to the pool. With that in mind, I would assume that Hoshino and Shirokotera will be the next Fest students added to the Recollection banner. We are also getting a Fest Start Dash banner. This special limited banner is only available to new players, and lasts for 28 days after creating an account. It is honestly a great addition for beginners, as they can simply reroll and aim to obtain all 3 available Fest students as their starting lineup, instead of following the old reroll meter. New unique gears. Another batch of unique gears has been announced. Unfortunately, still no Kyoko unique gear to finally remove the infamous CC mold. Instead, Iroha, B. Karin, and Aane are receiving theirs furniture lock feature. A furniture lock system has finally been added. It may sound like a very small quality of life feature, but it is honestly a great addition. Now your air furniture can no longer accidentally become crafting chamber materials because of one unfortunate click. And honestly, that is probably enough reason to celebrate. I think that covers everything important from the Livestream. The remaining announcements were mostly merchandise, which many of us probably cannot purchase anyway because of regional limitations. And that's about it from the Blue Archive JP Livestream. Honestly, there are less content to introduce, but for Kisaki fans, this is huge W Alter. And that should be all. As always, Godspeed.